Yes, sir. Let's start the meeting. A very good evening to one and all present here. On behalf of Madurai branch, I welcome all the senior members, past chairman, and members for today's meeting. And I welcome our today's speaker, CA Chaitanya sir, all along from Bangalore. Hearty welcome, sir. Hearty welcome. Chaitanya sir is basically a chartered accountant, and now he's practicing as an advocate in direct tax and indirect tax areas. In fact, sir is addressing in various webinars across India now since due to this lockdown. So we are lucky enough to get his date confirmation 1 month before itself. And thank you, sir. Thank you for accepting your invite in spite of your busy schedule. And regarding our today's topic is on faceless assessment, key challenges. Our Honorable Prime Minister Narendra Modi ji launched this faceless assessment scheme, transparent taxation, by the way of honoring the honest taxpayers on August 13th. So it is a great revolutionary change that happened across India. So since this faceless assessment scheme will be having a lot of changes, so we have organized this meeting to discuss about it. So we have a right resource person today, CA Chaitanya sir. In fact, he is the most wanted speaker in Bangalore chapters and Bombay Chartered Accountants Society there and all. Now, let me give a brief introduction about our today's speaker. He is practicing as a chartered accountant for the period of 14 years, specializing in taxation matters. Now, at present, he is practicing as an advocate in Karnataka High Court. He had given lectures at IIM, Bangalore, MTP of ICI New Delhi, and Direct Taxes Training Centers of Income Tax Department. And he has presented various papers in income tax and VAT at various metros and other cities at forums of ICI, Bombay Chartered Accountants Societies, CTC Mumbai, and All India Federation of Tax Practitioners, and Bangalore Chamber of Industry and Commerce, etc. He is a member of study group of ICI for framing guidance note on transfer pricing. He has co-authored 2 books, Tax Holiday under Section 10A and 10B, published by Wolters Kluwer, and the another book name is Decoding Section 5, published by Oak Ridge, and authored a book on special economic zone. And he has contributed various articles on the Bombay Chartered Accountant Journal, Taxman, CTR, and other journals. He has been deposed before Committee on Direct Tax Matters, headed by Honorable Justice A.P. Shaw on the levy of matter on FII. And he is a country reporter of India for IFA Seoul Congress 2018 on withholding tax. With this brief introduction, I welcome once again, sir. Over to you, sir.
Are you able to see the screen?
Please share the screen, sir.
I'll do that. Is it okay now?
One second. Yes, sir, it is visible.
I would, at the outset, thank Madurai's chairperson for giving an opportunity to spend some time on the faithless assessment. See, me being a lawyer for last 16 plus years and not doing any groundwork with the department, honestly, I wasn't very conversant with the faithless assessment scheme because we don't do assessments. We only get in after the assessment orders are passed and the litigation starts. Just when she called about the day when the Prime Minister, launched the scheme, there was a Doordarshan program, in Bangalore, who invited me along with the Chief Commissioner, which made me spend some time on the faithless assessments. And thankfully, the Madurai chairperson also suggested that, maybe I would speak on faithless assessment. But for these 2 occasions, I would have been completely faithless to address the faithless assessment because I wouldn't have known much about it. And my respects to Mr. Venkatachalam and other seniors from Madurai Professional Fraternity and all the learned delegates. As I would address you today, this evening, in the scheme of faithless assessment scheme, we will all appreciate that the step that is being taken is in the right direction. there are people who have expressed some sort of apprehension about the scheme, whether it would be really successful, whether it's going to be really faithless. Is it that the corruption would finally end? Is it that the harassment would end? See, no one would be able to like predict the exact outcome. But one thing is certain, that the scheme as such, one of the very unique schemes, I would say, on earth, to have attempted to make it a 360-degree faceless. So there are two ways of looking at it. One is it's a very, very innovative move. Two, because it is launched now, and it was, working on a pilot basis for last a few months, wherein only about 5,000 cases were picked. And it's only now that all the assessments have to be invariably made under faithless assessment scheme. No doubt we'll encounter a lot of hitches, lot of issues. But then knowing our capability and ability in information technology, like how this country has handled a very vast area like GST, I'm sure the various shortcomings which we would come across will be addressed. So the most important thing at this point in time in these days of COVID is that, well, let's look at this scheme very positively. Let us hope for the best. And while of course we would point out various infirmities and the shortcomings, it is not to criticize the scheme as such. It is basically to tell the framers of the scheme that these are the areas that would require to be fixed. Now, with this background, we will. I have another request for the delegates is that I would keep asking you. I would keep taking pause every now and then for questions. So kindly feel absolutely free to ask whatever questions that would come to your mind. So I would not assure you that all your questions will have answers with me, but the objective of you asking questions is that we are all facing this faceless assessment for the first time. So I'm sure we will have a lot of issues. You as chartered accountants, being in the field of assessment for decades, would definitely be able to conceive the areas where there will be concerns. So this is not a case of one-way lecture. This is a case of an interaction, and kindly participate and keep asking questions. Whenever I take pause, I would try to answer the questions. If any of your questions I don't know the answer, I will tell you, I will answer in the end and finally escape from it. Okay, in the later vein, right? Now, so it's not that the faithless assessment is introduced at one shot without an introduction to the information technology. If you look at the roadmap or the genesis which we've had, you would see way back in 2006 we had e-filing introduced, and we had in 2011 where 143(1) capital A was inserted by Finance Act of 2011 for electronic processing of returns through the central processing centers. And then you had the electronic compliance verification through your email interaction with the jurisdictional tax authority, brought in by 2015. And in 2015, again, you had something called as electronic platform known as ITBA. So that is where you will have all your tax data captured. And then you have in 2018, they brought out the statutory amendment. This is extremely important. This is the foundation for the faceless assessment. In 143, they brought in three subsections, 3A, 3B, and 3C, by Finance Act of 2018, paving the way for introduction of the scheme, because scheme as such cannot be just like that introduced. It has to be in harmony with the statute, and statutory enabling will have to be done. And that was carried out in 2018 by the late Arun Jaitley, then Finance Minister. So in 2019 itself, before this faceless scheme was brought in, there was an e-proceeding, and the circulars were circular 27 of 2009 dated 26/9/2019 was issued, which was making it semi-faceless. It restricted the personal appearances only in very, very few cases. But then a comprehensive scheme came in later on, which subsequently got renamed as phaseless assessment scheme. So this phaseless assessment scheme is the result of the recommendation by the Tax Administration Reform Commission, TARC. Look at some of the recommendations of TARC and their observation. What TARC felt is presently the assessments are happening on the basis of goals set for the assessing officers, the targets set for them. These targets decide the promotion and their postings, etc., which meant that the department officials became quite unfair to the assessees and rather were keen on meeting the target. So unrealistic targets set on the tax guys would make them recover tax by hook or crook, irrespective of fact that whether the additions made are fair or not. So that is where the TARC commented what is required is a robust framework that is holistic in its approach to issues of performance management. So that is what they suggested. And the finance minister, as I said earlier, in Finance Act of 2018 brought in subsections 3A, 3B, and 3C to enable the department to notify a new scheme for assessment, where the assessment will be done in electronic mode, which will almost eliminate person-to-person contact, leading to greater efficiency and transparency. Now, what these three sections are brought in the Finance Act of 2018, you would know that 143 comes as part of Chapter 14, which deals with assessment, and you will have 3A, which says the central government may make a scheme by notification in the official gazette for the purposes of making assessment of total income or loss of the assessee under subsection 3 or section 144. 144 wasn't there in 2018. By Finance Act of 2020, 144 also has been introduced into subsection 3A, so as to impart greater efficiency, transparency, and accountability by eliminating the interface between the assessing officer and the assessee in the course of proceedings to the extent technologically feasible. So there need not be a face-to-face interaction. So the objective is to the extent technologically feasible to eliminate the interface. Second, optimize the utilization of resources through economies of scale and functional specialization. See, what would happen presently is that different circles, different field functionaries will have different workloads. A person in Madurai versus person in Chennai, a person in Madurai versus a person in, say, Kumbakonam. Assessing officers would have varied workloads because they are assessing only the assessees who will come within the jurisdiction. So there are some people who are overworked, some people who are thoroughly underworked. Here is a case where it's a seamless dynamic jurisdiction where work could be allotted across the country. You sitting in Madurai, your assessment could be made by somebody who sits in Srinagar, or somebody who sits in Ahmedabad, or somebody in Ahmedabad may be assessed by a tax guy in Kumbakonam. So anything of this could happen. That's why they call it as dynamic jurisdiction. It's a team-based assessment. No one single officer would do your assessment. So your assessment is done by assessment unit with the involvement of other units, which I'll take you through a little more in detail later on. So these are the objectives which are sought to be achieved. They would have greater efficiency and they'll have greater transparency. You would not even know who the assessment unit is, who are the officers, unless, there is no way you could contact them. Of course, it's possible for them to contact you, but you would not be in a position to contact them because you wouldn't even know till they reach out to you as to who are they. Now, if you would see the section, you would know as to what are considered for the purpose of phaseless assessment. 143 could be done, all the regular assessments. 144, best judgment assessment could be done. Even search assessment relating to the assessment year relevant to the previous year of search. So you would know that when a search takes place, you will have 153A or 153C for past 6 years. Those 6 years which are covered under 153A or C would not get covered by the phaseless assessment, but the previous year in which the search takes place, the assessment of that previous year could as well be conducted by This unless it is transferred to the central circle. If that is also transferred to the central circle, then it would be outside the scheme of fairless assessment. Then what are excluded? If you look at 143.3, it only makes a reference to 143.3a, it will only make a reference to 143.3 and 144. So obviously it will mean that 147 is not included. 153A and 153C assessments, as I said earlier, are not included. That apart, there are some other assessment procedures in chapter 16 of the Income Tax Act. They are called accelerated assessments. Like you will have a situation of a non-resident carrying on shipping business under 172. You will have situation of the 174 and 174A. You will have 175, you will have 176. These are situations where for the broken previous year, the assessments could be carried out on an accelerated basis without having to wait for end of the relevant previous year and emergence of the assessment year. So these cannot be done under the faithless assessment. Similarly, the remand cases. See, you would go in appeal, the tribunal may remand it to AO, the High Court may remand it to AO, the Supreme Court may remand it to AO. The remand matters are not intended to be covered because they cannot be regarded as 143.3 or 144 situations. So this is as per the section. But then when you would compare the section with the scheme, there is some mismatch. I mentioned to you earlier that 147 is not in the section. That is 143.3a to be covered by faithless scheme. However, if you go through the faithless scheme, you will find 147 also being part of it. So there is some mismatch. And secondly, take the case of a non-filer, a person who would not file the return of income under 139(1), 4 or 5, and a person to whom the notice under 142(1)(1) has not been issued, asking him to file a return. Such a person is amenable to a best judgment assessment under 144. If you look at 143.3a, even those cases are intended to be covered by the scheme. However, if you examine the scheme, it will not address the case of a person who has never filed the return of income to whom the notice under 142(1)(1) has not been issued. So basically, I'm trying to highlight you the gaps between what section provides under 143.3a and what scheme envisages. Like 147, section does not provide, but the scheme embraces. Non-filer's case, section provides, but the scheme doesn't address that. So these are some of the, interesting contrasts which you would notice when you compare the language of the section along with the scheme. Now, another important thing is, if you look at 143.3a, the section says for the purpose of making assessment under 143.3 and 144, the central government may bring out a scheme. But then if they bring out a scheme, it has to be compatible with the Income Tax Act. If it is incompatible with the Income Tax Act, the assessees, when it becomes adverse to them, will go and challenge. So that is why they have brought in 143.3b, where they empower the central government for the purpose of giving effect to the scheme. What the central government may do is, they may issue a notification directing that any of the provisions of the Income Tax Act relating to assessment shall not apply or shall apply with such exceptions, modifications, or adaptations. I'll give you an example. So you will have a situation of jurisdiction under section 120, read with 124. You will have a situation of 143.2 notice. You will have a situation of 142.1.1 notice seeking information from you. You will have a situation of jurisdictional officer alone passing the order under 143.3. But then the scheme will not be compatible with this. So what 143.3b provides is to enable the central government to notify, look at these sections. These sections now will have to be read as modified for the purpose of implementation of the scheme. So while 143.3a will enable central government to introduce a scheme, 143.3b will permit central government to modify the provisions of the act itself to suit the scheme. It is not other way around. Scheme is not modified to suit the act. Rather, the provisions of the Act will now be modified to fit into the scheme. So this is the interplay between 143.3a and 143.3b. And when you look at the notifications issued for faithless assessment, there are always a twin notification. First part of notification brings the scheme under 143.3a. Second part of the notification will look at the adaptations of various provisions of the Income Tax Act. So this is how you will have to understand. Together, 143.3a together with 143.3b will have to be understood. Now, one interesting aspect of, there is one infirmity which they have to address. If you look at 143.3a, it says the scheme is brought in to make an assessment under 143.3 or 144. When can you make an assessment under 143.3 or 144? It's only when a notice under 143.2 is issued. If no notice is issued, you have the circular of 549 of 1987 issued by the board. You have the Blue Moons case in 322 ITR, 361 Supreme Court, where they've said that if the notice is not issued, your returned income is deemed to be accepted. So till a notice is issued under 143.2, there is no question of making assessment under 143.3 or 144. So therefore, unless and until a notice is issued, 143.3 and 143.4 would not come. So 144.3 also cannot come. And so most importantly, if you look at 143.3a as coming into play after the notice is issued, then in the scheme which permits the National E-Assessment Center to issue you 143.2 notice will be in violation of 143.3a, because, to reiterate, 143.3a can come in only after the notice is issued, and therefore whatever scheme you are going to suggest under 143.3a, whatever adaptation you are making under 143.3b will have to be only in respect of making assessment under 143.3, which can start only after 143.2 notice. Therefore, the scheme as well as the notification cannot reach out to modifying 143.2. So therefore, right now it is possible for the assessee to argue that my notice under 143.2 can come only from a jurisdictional assessing officer, not from NESC. This is only a technical argument. I'm only bringing out this infirmity, not that it's a criticization of the scheme, but it's something that they'll have to address, is what I'm trying to highlight. Now, so with this, we will get into the scheme. And once the scheme was launched, it was actually launched on 12/9/2019, but then on the day when the PM, made an announcement on 13/8/2020, it got modified. So now you cannot read the older one of 61 of 2009. You'll have to see that as modified by notification 2745 13/8/2020. In fact, the scheme was originally called as E-Assessment Scheme 2019, but the PM wanted it to be called as Faithless Assessment Scheme, because he wanted it to be faceless, seamless, painless. So left to ourselves, we would also have wanted it to be taxless, isn't it? And fearless. Now, alongside that, they have also issued various other notifications, which inter alia include 72 of 2019, where they gave the officers of National E-Assessment Center, 77 of 2019, where they give the officers of regional reassessment centers and allocated the jurisdictions. Then they have also issued an order under 119 on 13/8/2020 to say that there cannot be a survey in your premises by the field officers except the investigation wing. So extremely important you see here, except the office of the investigation wing. The local jurisdictional assessing officers cannot visit your premises under survey. Of course, the TDS officers may do it for the compliance of TDS. Whether you're complying with Chapter 17B requirements, the TDS officers can come. The jurisdictional assessing officers and the field officers cannot come, but who can come are the investigation wing can come on a survey. Now, this is, of course, the various these are the various objects which I've already highlighted. And there are some changes made between the 2019 thing where it was called as, now it's the name is changed to phaseless assessment from the e-assessment, and scope, some amendments are carried out. Anyway, I would only be dealing with the amended one, so I will not burden you with this kind of an analysis. Now, what happened was, on a pilot basis, they picked about 58,000 cases just to see how it works. And as of 4th of August 2020 press release, they had done about 8,700 cases. Thanks to COVID, they were not able to complete, and they expect the rest to be completed very soon. And by which time they have also issued an office order under 119, whereby CBDT has said that except the central circle and except the international circle, all assessments have to be passed by the National E-Assessment Center through the phaseless scheme. If not, such assessment is void ab initio. I guess you heard me carefully. So, except those which are centralized, such cases, except those who would come under international taxes, all the assessment orders hereafter be passed by National E-Assessment Center through the phaseless assessment scheme. Any assessment order which is not in conformity with this order shall be treated as non-est and shall be deemed never to have been passed. So they can't pass any order now other than through phaseless assessment. This would mean that the chartered accountants now have no choice but to be conversant with the scheme, understand the nitty-gritty of the scheme, the niceties associated with it, and gear up not only yourself but also your clients. So make sure that all these scrutiny assessments that would now happen through the phaseless scheme are handled properly. Now, with this, I'll take you to the scheme. Look at the scheme. This is the brief scheme, the synopsis. You have about 12 paragraphs. Each paragraph has clauses and the subclauses. You have the paragraph 1, which deals with the title and the commencement. You have paragraph 2, which is extremely important because it seeks to define various terms. It defines terms like what is assessment, what is automated allocation system, what is automated examination tool, what is the computer resource, what is the computer system, what is computer resource of the assessee. And you would notice that a good amount of provisions of Information Technology Act, IT Act of 2000 have been brought in here. So the chartered accountants now will have to be conversant not only with the phaseless scheme, they also will have to be conversant with the Information Technology Act, because that would explain you what is digital signature, what is electronic record, and what is electronic signature, what is hash function, who is the originator. No, these are some of the terms which have been brought and borrowed from the Information Technology Act of 2000. These terms are simply borrowed from that act. So it's important for you guys to be conversant with the IT Act. Now, scope of scheme. Who does the scheme apply? Next, what are the various centers and the units who are involved in the scheme? And paragraph 5 is the most critical paragraph. So it really takes time for you to get to know about this paragraph 5. Looks a little complex, but it requires a couple of more readings for you to be actually understanding it. Then you'll have para 6, which will deal with penalty. Para 7, appellate proceedings. Para 8 deals with exchange of communication exclusively by electronic mode. No more writing letters. It has to be through electronic mode. And how do you authenticate an electronic record? How do you deliver an electronic record? And no personal appearance at all in any centers and units, except in very, very a few cases which are dealt with in para 12. So this in brief is the synopsis of the scheme. Now, Some important terms which you have to understand. One is addressee. So who is the addressee? As I've said earlier, you will have to make a good amount of reference to Information Technology Act. Addressee, again, you'll have to go back to Section 21B of the IT Act, to whom the information is targeted to be sent, the addressee. Then you will have the definition of assessment. They say assessment of total income or loss under 143.3 or under 144. 215 is important here. 216 also is important. Look at the automated allocation system. See, your assessment will go to any assessment unit anywhere in the country on the basis of an automated allocation system. So what is this automated allocation system? It's an algorithm for random allocation of cases. You know, there is no human intervention here. No one will decide your case will go to A, your case will go to B. It is an automatic system where, using the algorithm, on a random basis, cases are allocated. And for this allocation, they use a lot of technological tools, which will inter alia include the artificial intelligence and machine learning. Whole objective is to make optimum use of resources. When they allocate the cases, no, they will ensure that across the country, the field officers' works are distributed equitably. There would not be inequitable distribution of work. And thereby, the allocation is optimized, use of resources is optimized. Then, whenever your return is filed and the assessment unit would pass a draft assessment order, the draft assessment order is subjected to an automated examination tool. What is this automated examination tool? It's again another algorithm for standardized examination of draft orders. Again, it would use the artificial intelligence and machine learning. And the objective of this is to reduce the scope for discretion. See, presently what is happening? My assessing officer will take a particular stand. Your assessing officer, you may be placed in an identical situation as me, but your assessing officer will take a different stand. So there is no consistency as to how the assessees are treated. So different assessing officers are taking different views, whereas assessees suffer because of this inconsistent approach. Therefore, to a very large extent, they would want to standardize, the position of the department across the country, the two without the human interface. They have developed an algorithm which will have, like your computer-aided selection scrutiny, CASS. So there are some risk parameters. So there is a risk management strategy. So here again is an automated tool which will use an algorithm using artificial intelligence and machine learning, wherein the department concern areas would have been fed. Your draft assessment order will vet through this particular, a scheme, and then they will decide whether the draft assessment order has to be accepted as it is, or if there are any infirmities, aberrations, risks, should it be referred to somebody else. So this is called automated examination tool. These two terms are extremely important, as we keep using these terms later on. Next is another important term which you'll have to be conversant with, real-time alert. What is this real-time alert? It is a communication sent to the assessee by way of an SMS on your registered mobile number, or you will have a mobile app which the department would have enabled you to do it, or you will have a registered email ID. You get an alert whenever any notice comes to you, whenever any communication comes to you from the department's end. The communication will have to be immediately backed by a real-time alert. Otherwise, you may not even see the mail. So you get an SMS. Look at the mail. Look at your mailbox. There's a mail from Income Tax Department. So this is to ensure that the notices electronically sent to the assessees are not left unattended. So therefore, you please understand, any communication from the department, any electronic communication from the department is backed by a real-time alert. So real-time alert is defined in 2120. Now, registered email address. See, why this is very critical is all the communications are intended to be sent to this. So your registered email address could be any one of these. One is what you have registered in your ITBA. So you have, if you are registered in the designated portal of ITBA, whatever email ID which you have communicated, either that email ID or in your latest tax return, whatever email ID which you have indicated, or your PAN database, whatever email ID which would have been furnished, or your Aadhaar linked email ID, or if you are a company, the ROC email ID, or if you have otherwise made available any other email ID to the income tax department. So these are the email IDs. Now the question that should immediately occur to you is that which email ID will they send, and which, if you have multiple email IDs, one on ITBA portal, one on latest IT return, and one is Aadhaar based email ID, the other one is PN linked email ID, you will not be seeing all the email IDs. So this is an important caution to you, which will have to also prevail upon the clients of yours, to make sure that they have not too many email IDs which will get spread. They should have one or two email IDs which they regularly see. So henceforth, all the taxpayers, it becomes extremely important to ensure that they see the email ID which is backed up, any communication to email ID is backed by the real-time alert, as I've indicated earlier. One another aspect here is, don't keep changing your mail ID. Particularly when your client is a company, if the employee's email ID is given, you have to give an email ID which will remain with the company even after that employee leaves and somebody else will come. Otherwise, what will happen is, many a times, let's say there is one finance executive who's been handling, his email ID would have been shared. All the communications would come. As long as he works with the company, it is fine. Tomorrow he quits the company, he'll go away. But how will department come to know? Department would keep sending mails to the email ID, and you would not even know what's happening. Then the notices will go unattended, which will result in a best judgment assessment or adverse orders which are getting passed. So therefore, a lot of housekeeping is required here from your end, client's end, to make sure that the email IDs are not frequently changed, and any change in email ID is immediately brought to the notice of ITBA. And if any employee, if his email ID is shared for the communication, if that employee ceases to be the employee, immediately the change is required to be notified. So this care has to be taken. Now, with this, we will go to the scope of the scheme. So paragraph 3 of the scheme says that the assessment shall be made in respect of such territorial area, persons, class of persons, incomes or class of incomes, cases or class of cases, as may be specified by the board. That means board will decide which will come under faithless scheme. Now, as I've said earlier, the board has stated that all the assessments through their order dated 13/8/2020, they said all the assessments except the central charge and the international tax charge will have to be under faithless scheme. It is in connection with this paragraph, the board has issued this particular order under section 119 of the Income Tax Act. Then you will also have to, now with this, we will see one more aspect here about the pending cases. What do I mean by pending cases? I understand the returns to be filed, the notices are to be issued. Now, take a situation where if you had filed the return and the notice under 143(2) has already been issued by your jurisdictional assessing officer, or a case where you are not filed a return in pursuance to notice under 142(1). So department would have asked you to file a return and you wouldn't have filed the return, and you are also covered here. Third is a situation where you may not have filed a return of income despite the notice that is issued to under 148(1), and subsequently you have even ignored the notice that is issued under 142(1) asking you to file the return. In all these three cases, see, the most important is the first one, where already scrutiny notices have come from your field officers. Even those cases will now be made under faithless scheme. and you will have to get a communication in this regard from the National Assessment Center saying that your assessment, though the notice is issued under 143(2) by the field officer, will now no longer be done by the field officer. The local jurisdictional officer will not do it. Even if the notice is already issued and some proceedings would have already taken place, it will all be done henceforth through phaseless assessment scheme. So even in respect of the assessments that are happening now, it would not continue with the existing local jurisdictional officer. It will now go to the phaseless assessment scheme. Now, paragraph 4 is another important para which you will have to know. It's extremely important. There are various centers and units, and you have to be conversant with what these centers are. See, in the scheme, there is a pyramid. At the top of the pyramid, you have National E-Assessment Center, NESC. What does NESC do? NESC is set up to facilitate the conduct of e-assessment proceedings, and NESC will have jurisdiction to make assessment. There is one NESC, and there are multiple regional e-assessment centers. These regional e-assessment centers essentially don't do much except they monitor the functions of different other units which will come within their area-wise jurisdiction. There is no like interface between regional e-assessment center and the assessee. No interface at all. Then you have the assessment units. What are the assessment units? These are the assessment units which would perform the function of making assessment. They would identify the points or issues which are material for determination of your tax liability or determination of your refund. They would seek the information or clarification on the points and issues which they have identified. They will analyze the same, and they will not pass the assessment order. They will only pass a draft assessment order. So they do the assessment work, but they will not communicate the assessment order to you. There is no interaction between you and the assessment unit. Then you have two more units, or rather three more units: verification unit, technical unit, and review unit. What is verification unit? If your assessment is picked for scrutiny, let us say it will go to an assessment unit in Ahmedabad. That assessment unit will pick your return, will examine the return. They would need some verification. They would want a cross verification. They will want to examine books of account. They will want to examine witness. They will want to record your statement. So you can't be asked to go to Ahmedabad from Madurai. So what then they will do is, the assessment unit in Ahmedabad will tell the National E-Assessment Center in Delhi, we need this information to be brought out from the assessee. Then NESC will then send it to a verification unit, maybe in Madurai, maybe somewhere close to Madurai, and then they will carry out the cross verification. They will carry out the inquiry. They will carry out, examination of witness. They'll record your statement, and they will then send it back to National Assessment Center, which will then pass it on to your Ahmedabad assessment unit. Similarly, if some technical aspects are to be examined, it could be valuation, it could be accounting, it could even be our 142 audit, it could be transfer pricing. Henceforth, what will happen is that will be done by some technical units at some part of the country. So all this will be carried out by the technical units. The inputs will go to NESC, which in turn will pass it on to the assessment unit, and assessment unit will use these inputs to pass a draft assessment order. Then you have something called review unit. After the draft assessment order is passed, the NESC at the top of your pyramid will decide on the basis of risk management strategy and on the basis of the automatic examination tool, which I explained a little ago. They will decide whether the draft assessment order passed by a particular assessment unit will require to be verified by another office. Then they will send it to review units. So now you will understand that in the field there are 4 units: assessment units, verification units, technical units, and review units. At the top, you have the National E-Assessment Center, NESC. Now, I would anyway take you through how these, various units would contribute to eventually passing an assessment order. But right now you have to be conversant with what is the respective role. I'll reiterate again, you have assessment unit which will actually do the assessment without, getting in touch with you. Then you have the verification unit, which will verify your books of account wherever it is necessary, which will examine you, which will take your statement. You have the technical unit, which will do the technical aspect like valuation, transfer pricing, accounting, audit, etc. And you will have the review unit, which will review the draft assessment order if it is assigned to it by the National Assessment Center. So these are broad functions. And the most important thing which you have to notice here is paragraph 4, clause 2, which says all the communication among the assessment unit, review unit, verification unit, and the technical unit will all have to be routed through NESC. There cannot be direct communication. That means assessment unit cannot decide which, verification unit it will want the input from. Assessment unit cannot decide which technical unit it would want expert opinion from. If the assessment unit wants anything, it will have to make the requisition to National Assessment Center, and the National Assessment Center will then go to a particular review unit, particular verification unit. And if the review unit does any, if the verification unit does any verification, if the technical unit gives any technical input, it will not give it to assessment unit. It will not even know from which assessment unit it has come. It has to send it to National Assessment Center, which will then send it to the assessment unit. For example, assessment unit would need some information from the assessee. For example, this 14211 notice, the department keeps sending you, you give that, you give this document, etc. Assessment unit cannot ask from the assessee. What assessment unit wants from the assessee will have to be first requisition to NESC. Then what NESC will do? NESC will ask the assessee to give it to NESC. So NESC will collect it, and like a postman, it will send it to the assessment unit. So most important thing which you have to notice here is any communication between any of these units and the assessee will have to be through NESC. Without the intervention of NESC, there cannot be direct communication. In other words, NESC is the sole point of communication between various units and also with the assessee or any other person. Now, if you would look at, I have mentioned to you the 4 field units: the assessment unit, verification unit, the technical unit, and the review unit. Who are the officers there? These units are headed by the officers of additional commissioner level. And at the bottom, you will have the assessing officer and the ministerial staff like inspectors, clerical staff, etc. Now, there are some jurisdiction based issue which for want of time, I will not discuss now. I'll take it up later on. Now with this, I will, before I proceed to paragraph 5, which is extremely critical, I'll take a pause and seek to answer the questions if you have any. Any questions
Yes,
you can ask me.
Yes, sir. We received 3 questions.
Yeah. Yes, please tell me.
Yes, sir. I'll just read out the question, sir.
Yeah, please.
Whether pending appeals with local CIT appeals will be continued by the local CIT himself, or these cases will also fall in the phaseless assessment.
Okay.
Pending cases.
Yeah. See, what has been brought in now is a phaseless assessment, not a phaseless appeal. Even in the phaseless assessment, ultimately, if an adverse assessment order is passed and if you're aggrieved, there is a provision in the phaseless assessment which says that the matter will be sent back to the jurisdictional assessing officer, and paragraph 7 of the phaseless assessment scheme says your local CIT appeal who has jurisdiction over your local jurisdictional officer, appeal continues to be addressed by the present CIT appeal. That will not get shifted. We are not discussing phaseless appeal. We are only discussing phaseless assessment. And the scheme only deals with phaseless assessment. See, going forward, they would want to bring in a similar phaseless appellate mechanism. But right now, it is not there. Yeah.
The next question. how the cases are selected for scrutiny for faceless assessment, whether any norms were spelled out, any fixed percentage of total returns filed.
See, if you look at the present statistics, 0.26%, 0.26% is picked for scrutiny. Not even 2.6%, 0.26% is picked for scrutiny. And as you would know, the scrutiny selection is largely on the basis of computer-aided selection process. This is again on the basis of the risk management strategy. See, there are some TP risk, transfer pricing risk parameters, non-transfer pricing risk parameters. So on which basis, howsoever basis presently they are selecting, that would continue. See, the faceless assessment scheme does not spell out the basis of selection of a case for scrutiny. It will pitch in after a case is selected for scrutiny. See, if it's not even selected for scrutiny, there is no question of faceless assessment. There is no assessment at all. Therefore, faceless assessment does not spell out the basis of scrutiny selection, which is continuing to be the same as it has been in the past, subject to the regular updation with the department does on the basis of the risk management strategy. Yes.
Next question by Vimla Madam. What will be the position of the cases where assessment has been completed and the order pending to be passed?
See, this would get into the larger issue as to when is an assessment order completed. When is an assessment completed? What is the meaning of assessment? The assessment means culmination of assessment proceedings by the assessing officer passing an order of assessment. So till the order of assessment is not only signed, but leaves out of the control of the department. He may sign and keep it in his drawer. That is not equivalent to completing assessment and passing an order of assessment. He has to pass, sign, and put it in the course of transmission whereby he wouldn't have control on the document. That is only when it is considered to have been completed. So answering Vimla ma'am's question, even if the assessment proceedings appear to have been concluded, but the order is not passed, that would also in terms of paragraph 5.3, which I took you through a little ago, will have to be passing through the faceless assessment. See, the answer is very simple. Let us say he has not passed the order as it. Can he again call you or not? He can definitely call you, even in the physical assessment. He may have even written in his case sheet noting that it is heard, but he could still call you. He can further say that in the course of dictation, I had some doubts, so I would want the assessee to again come issue notice to assessee. So likewise, it is considered as pending. See, till such time, there are some decisions which have gone to the extent of saying till such time the order reaches you, it is considered as pending. Supreme Court in Shatrusaliya Digvijay Singh in the context of Settlement Commission has said that, Settlement Commission, you can go only when it's pending. So there is a situation where sometimes departmental officials will backdate the order and make the order and say that it's no more pending and you cannot go to Settlement Commission. So the Supreme Court has said that till such time, in Shatrusaliya Digvijay Singh case, till such time it reaches you, it has to be treated as pending. So same analogy will apply now.
Next question by Vijayan sir. Draft order will be passed after collecting necessary information. So thereafter, whether we can ask for any more information.
I will examine. We will answer this question a little later because I am yet to explain this. Yeah.
Okay, sir. Then that's all, sir.
That's it, no? Yeah. Now, you have to hear me really, really carefully. So, because I'm going through paragraph 5 now, and this is the most critical part of the faceless assessment scheme. Paragraph 5, clause 1 says, assessment under this scheme shall be made as per the following procedure. So what's the procedure? NESC will serve a notice on the assessee under 143(2) specifying issues for selection of his case for assessment. So who will issue notice now? NESC will issue notice, not the local, like jurisdictional officer. It is NESC will issue the notice. You may ask me a question. How is it that NESC is able to issue notice? Do they have jurisdiction? So what the board has done is they have passed an order conferring concurrent jurisdiction on the NESC. So henceforth, all your cases will have concurrent jurisdiction. Your Madurai tax officer will have jurisdiction on you, as well as NESC will have jurisdiction on you. If I'm in Bangalore, my local, I'm a professional, there is a professional circle. So there is one assistant commissioner or the additional commissioner, deputy commissioner who has jurisdiction over me. Apart from him, NESC will have jurisdiction over me. So henceforth, every assessee will have, concurrent jurisdiction over him. One by the local jurisdiction officer, the other by the NESC. But once the NESC assumes jurisdiction, the jurisdiction of the local officer will be in limbo. It will be in a suspended animation. So it will not exist. It will come back after the final order is passed by the National Assessment Center. And once it is communicated to you for the purpose of recovery, for the purpose of attachment, for the purpose of, determining before which CIT appeal you go for appeal, for all these purposes, the electronic records will be transmitted back to the local jurisdictional assessing officer. But once the notice comes to you under 143(2), till the assessment order is passed under the phaseless assessment scheme, your jurisdiction would lie with NESC, and the local jurisdictional officer's jurisdiction on you will be kept in temporary suspension. Point number one. Now, so once you get the notice from NESC under 143(2), within 15 days of the date of receipt, you will have to respond. And one more thing you'll have to notice, when the 143(2) notice comes, unlike the present practice where a standard printed notice comes, here 143(2) notice comes specifying the issues for selection. So it doesn't seem as of now that it's going to be a comprehensive scrutiny. It seems that it's a specific scrutiny. They will specify what issues are selected in your case. So it is issue-based assessment. We don't know how it transpires in practice later on. If they want to comprehensively assess you, they may say all issues connected with the assessment, they may say so. We don't know. But as of now, if you look at subclass 1, it says 143(2) shall specify the issues for selection of your case for assessment. Then once the notice comes to you, you may respond to the notice within 15 days. But who do you respond to? Back to National Assessment Center. As I said earlier, you are communicating only with NESC and none else. It's not mandatory for you to respond. You may respond, you may not respond, but you would appreciate that it is in your interest to respond. So whatever you want to say in respect of the issues which they have chosen, you may respond to them. This is subclass 2. Now, subclass 3. What subclass 3 says is, which I already stated earlier, pending cases. See, if what Vimla madam asked a little ago, that if the assessment is almost completed except the receipt of order, and those cases which I already took you through a little ago, these would now be shifted to the phaseless assessment scheme. This is under clause 3. Now, once your case is picked for scrutiny, what would happen? Clause 4 will come into picture. What does clause 4 say? NESC shall assign your case to a specific assessment unit in any one regional assessment center through an automated allocation system. I've already told you what is automated allocation system. It's an algorithm for random allocation of case using artificial intelligence and machine learning. There is no human discretion here. There is no human intervention here. So the moment a notice comes to you, that notice would be put into the system, and the system will decide as to which assessment unit under which regional reassessment center it will go. So you would not even know to which assessment center it has gone. It is not communicated to you. So your return, which is picked for scrutiny, which goes to some assessment unit in Ahmedabad, you would not know that it has gone to Ahmedabad. It's completely opaque as far as you are concerned. Now, let us say your case is sent to Ahmedabad assessment unit. So Ahmedabad assessment unit As I've told earlier, who are the officers in the assessment unit? It will consist at the top the additional CAT, at the bottom up to the income tax officer and the ministerial staff like the inspectors, the clerks, etc. These are all part of this assessment unit. So your case goes to assessment unit in Ahmedabad. They will look at your return. Then they may want some further information from you. So look at this. Subclass 5 says, where a case is assigned to the assessment unit, it may make a request to the NESC. For what? For obtaining such further information, documents or evidence from the assessee or any other person as it may specify. Your return, they may need information from you or they may need information from somebody else. For example, take a case of section 68. There's a cash credit. So they would want to examine not only you, they would also want to examine the creditor, because whether the credit is genuine, identity, creditworthiness, all these will have to be examined for the purpose of 68 edition. So for which purpose they may have to be taking evidence, examine the information from somebody else. Or you may have booked a lot of purchases. They may want to check with your creditors as to whether these purchases are genuine or not. You have booked some expenditure, you have made some sales, you have booked some capital gains. You may have possibly, created a fake capital gain situation just to launder your black income into white income. So they would want to examine. So for all these purposes, the assessment unit in Ahmedabad will make a request to the National Assessment Center. And if further inquiry or verification will have to be made, then they will send it to, they will again say, NESC, see, kindly get it verified. Some examination will have to be made. Confirmations will have to be obtained. Then for conducting certain inquiry or verification by verification unit, the assessment unit in Ahmedabad will request NESC. Then let us say yours is a transfer pricing case, 92 CA, a reference will have to be made by the assessing officer to transfer pricing officer. The valuation order, valuation reference will have to be made under 142A of the Income Tax Act, or under section 55A of the Income Tax Act when it comes to the capital gains. So, some summons will have to be issued. Commission will have to be issued. So, expert opinion will have to be taken. For these purposes, if the Ahmedabad assessment unit would want such things, then it will seek technical assistance. That is, subclass C. So, A, B, C, they may either need information from the assessee, they may either need information from certain other person, or they may need an inquiry or verification to be conducted. They may need technical assistance from the technical unit. All these, they'll have to go back to NESC. So once the NESC will have this requirement, what will NESC do? Look at now clause 6. It says, where a request for obtaining further information, documents or evidence from the assessee or any other person has been made by the assessment unit, NESC shall issue appropriate notice or requisition to the assessee or any other person for obtaining information, documents, evidence requisitioned by the assessment unit. Now, clause 7 then says, assessee or any other person, as the case may be, to whom such requisition is made by NESC, will have to file the response to the notice within the time specified by the NESC notice or within the extended time on an application made by you for extended time. So I'll repeat again, wherever the assessment unit in your example, Ahmedabad assessment unit would require any information from you or any other person, they would requisition to NESC. Then in terms of subclass 6, NESC will ask you, give this information, they'll send you a notice. In terms of subclass 7, you have a duty to give it. Any failure to do so will mean a penalty in terms of section 271(1)(b). Like non-compliance with 142(1), you're liable to pay a penalty of 10,000 rupees or whatever. Penalty could be levied by the NESC here. So therefore, whenever the information, additional information will have to be furnished, NESC will interact with you and you have to give it to NESC in accordance with the notice that you get from NESC within the time specified therein. And in case for whatever reason you are not able to furnish the information within the time, you may seek extension. And NESC will extend the time within which you'll have to give. Now, if at all your Ahmedabad assessment unit has requested that some inquiry or verification will have to be carried out by a verification unit, such request which the assessment unit has made to NESC, what NESC does is it will assign it to a verification unit through an automated allocation system. Here again, there is an algorithm which will decide on the basis of artificial intelligence and the machine learning to decide as to which verification system it will go. Similarly, in clause 9, where technical assistance is sought from the technical unit, and if such request is made by your Ahmedabad assessment unit to NESC, NESC will allot it to any technical unit, again without the human intervention. So that means what? The request that will go to NESC either for verification or for technical assistance, it will be assigned to the technical unit or the verification unit in a seamless process through this automated allocation system. No human body will decide, we will send it to this verification unit in Chennai, we will send it to this technical unit in Bangalore. No, it's again done through an automated process. And what will happen? This technical unit or the verification unit will carry out the verification or the work which is assigned to them, and they will furnish the report to NESC. They will not send it to assessment unit. They will send the report to NESC. And what will NESC do with that report? It will send the report to the assessment unit, that is Ahmedabad. I hope you have understood so far that how the verification is done, how the technical assistance is given, how the information is sought, and how this is sought from NESC and eventually transmitted to the concerned assessment unit in terms of clause 10. Now, see, when NESC would ask you, as I said earlier, in clause 6, or rather clause 7, NESC will issue a notice, give this information. And if you don't give, then what would happen is clause 11 will come into play. It's like non-compliance with 142(1) notice in a physical assessment. What will the assessing officer have done? When he seeks information from you, if you don't give information, will he not give you best judgment notice? Similarly here also, if in terms of clause 7, when information is sought from you, and if you fail to comply with the notice issued under clause 6, or notice issued under 142(1)(1), or a direction issued under 142(2)(a), then NESC, 142(2)(a), the special audit, NESC will serve a notice on you under section 144, giving you an opportunity to show causes to why your assessment should not be completed to the best of your judgment. Then, the moment such notice comes, physically what you would have done, you would have responded. Likewise, you have to respond to that notice under 144 here in terms of clause 12. So what does clause 12 say? Assessee shall, within the time specified in the notice referred to in clause 11, or such time as may be extended on the basis of an application in this regard, file response to NESC. Now, if you don't respond within the time or within the extended time, what will NESC do? It will intimate your Ahmedabad unit, hey, look, this guy has not responded. So proceed with 144. Instead, if you respond, the response will be sent to the assessment unit. Now, what will assessment unit in Ahmedabad does? What will they do? Now, the assessment unit in Ahmedabad will have your return, will have the responses furnished by you at the time when the 143(2) notice was issued, will have the further information submitted by you to NESC, which is sent to assessment unit, will have the verification report, will have the technical report, which would have come to it through NESC from verification unit or technical unit. Now it is in possession of all the information. Or it may not be in possession of any information because you are not cooperated. So two options. Now, what assessment unit in Ahmedabad does in terms of clause 14 is it will pass a draft assessment order. What sort of draft assessment order? It will either accept the return returned by you, income returned by you, or tax payable by you, or the sum refundable to you, or if you're not cooperated by not responding to notices issued to you in terms of the clauses 7 as well as clause 11, then the NESC would have intimated Ahmedabad unit, assessee is not cooperating, he is not responding. Then they'll pass a best judgment draft order, but it's only a draft assessment order. So we have come up to one stage now. We have come up to one milestone where the assessment unit has passed a draft assessment order, either on the basis of information where you have cooperated, or on the basis of their best judgment where you are not cooperated. They may have accepted your returned income or the tax payable or the refund due, or they may have suggested modification to it. So there could be an adverse order, there could be a favorable order, whatever, but it's a draft assessment order, at which point in time, in terms of clause 15, they will also provide details of the penalty proceedings to be initiated thereon to NESC. Now, you know what the assessment unit does? It passes the draft order. It will not send you the draft order. You will not even know when whether draft order is passed or not. The draft order will be sent to NESC along with details for initiation of penalty, if any. So this is one critical milestone. Any questions so far up till here?
So I think that proceeds, sir. Proceed further.
We proceed, right? So because we have, it's already 7:15. Oh my God, we are going pretty slow. Are you fine with the speed, or you would want me to rush through the provisions?
No, sir, it's fine, sir.
Okay.
You can go in, sir.
See, the objective is not to make you guys expert in faithless assessment. Objective is to at least introduce the subject whereby you can later on use your, expert brains on, like mulling over different difficulties associated with this. Now, what will happen when the draft assessment order goes to NESC? See, when the draft assessment order goes to NESC, NESC will not have any human intervention. They have a risk management strategy and they have an automated examination tool. I have already told you what is an automated examination tool. What it does is it provides for a standardized measure of verification, standardization of examination on the, again, basis of artificial intelligence and machine learning. So it's completely automated here. No one will look at this draft assessment order in person and decide, oh, this is how it has to be handled. No, it's completely automated. Then it has three options. Alternatives, they are not concurrent and coexisting. They're mutually exclusive. It may do three things. It may finalize the assessment as per the draft order and serve a copy of such order and notice for initiating penalty proceedings to the assessee, along with the demand notice, specifying how much you'll have to pay, or if any refund is due to you, what is the refund due to you. So what do you mean by this? It will finalize the assessment, meaning the assessment unit has accepted your returned income. There is no modification suggested, in which case they may accept it. National Assessment Center may accept it, and it will finalize the assessment order and then serve a copy. Who will sign this order? See, in NESC, you have, NESC is headed by the Principal Chief Commissioner and the Principal Director General of Income Tax at the top. At the bottom, you will have the Income Tax Officer. One of them will sign this through digital signature, but it will be considered as having been passed by NESC, not by that particular officer whose signature is given. So this will give interesting questions to you later on in terms of 263 proceedings, 264 proceedings, whether a commissioner in exercise of 263 disturb an order which is passed by NESC, which is headed by the Principal Chief Commissioner. These questions will arise over a period of time. There are a lot of questions, but for us to understand questions, we need to understand the scheme first. So I may not be able to discuss all the, questions that would arise. Let me just explain the scheme to you first. So one option is they may accept the assessment order passed. Another option is provide an opportunity to the assessee in case a modification is proposed by serving a notice on you to call and show causes to why the assessment should not be completed as per the proposed modification. That means if in the draft order there are any adverse propositions, then NESC will have to necessarily issue a show cause notice, ask you a response for it. This is second alternative. The third alternative is NESC may assign the draft assessment order to a review unit through an automated allocation system for conducting review of such order. Now you have to be carefully understanding. I'll reiterate at the cost of repetition that it is possible for NESC to do either A or B or C. It can't do A and C, B and C, no. Either A or B or C. Now take a situation where a proper assessment, the assessment unit has accepted a returned income. Then it's not mandatory for NESC to pass a final assessment order. It must still send it to review unit. It must still not accept it. So just because assessment unit has not modified any, suggested any modification doesn't mean NESC has to necessarily accept it. It must still review, send it to review unit for review. Similarly, let us say some adverse modifications are proposed. Then it has two options. One is to send you a show cause notice. Other one is not even tell you that. Simply refer it to review unit. So in which case you will not even know. So you will come to know only if A or B are invoked. If A is invoked, you will know, yes, my return is accepted. If B is issued, you would know, oh, my return is not accepted, there's a modification, I have to respond. If they don't do A, if they don't do B, but if they do C, where they send the draft assessment order to review unit, you will not even know that. Without your knowledge, it will go to review unit. But whether they'll have to do A, whether they'll have to do B, whether they'll have to do C, will depend on the risk management strategy and the automated examination tool, which will be adopted by NESC. Any question on this?
One second.
Because this is extremely important. This is
Yes, sir.
the foundational aspect. Yeah.
Are there any time limit for completing an assessment in the faceless assessment scheme?
No, exactly. 153 time limit will continue. See, whatever 153 time limit you have will continue.
So 1 second, sir. 1 minute. Right, sir.
That's it.
Whether conferring of concurrent jurisdiction on NESC is valid, as it is not an income tax authority under Section 116 of the Act. Section 120 enables the board to only confer jurisdiction on the income tax authorities only.
Exactly. A very good question. A very good question. I did not, initiate this question from my end because I thought, let me first take you through the scheme. See, first of all, it is inconceivable that a unit passes an order. NESC passes an order. Who is NESC? It is not an income tax authority. It is just a body of income tax authorities. Jurisdiction cannot be conferred on a body. Jurisdiction has to be conferred on an income tax authority. Okay. However, if you look at 143(3)(b), they say it is possible for central government to issue a notification saying which of the provisions of the Act will have to be read with modification or adaptation as suggested. Therefore, they have issued another notification, twin notification, wherein they ought to have provided for this. Though they have said 120 also will stand modified, they are not provided for in the twin part of the notification that 120 will have to be henceforth understood as modified with reference not to income tax authority, but to the unit. So there is a risk of challenge to this. So what they have to do is they will have to modify their notification issued under 143(3)(b) to provide for this. So it's an excellent question. I didn't choose to answer it because it was at a larger aspect. Yes.
Okay, so next question by the same member. Section 143(3)(c) requires the notification issued under 3A or 3B to be tabled in both the houses of parliament. Is there any purpose for the same?
Obviously, because 143(3)(b), see, after all, who does Income Tax Act? Parliament. Correct? Parliament makes act. Now, you have 143(3)(b), which will empower central government to say that these provisions are not applicable. That means they are going to the extent of amending the Income Tax Act, which will amount to an executive being allowed to legislate. So whenever an executive is allowed to legislate, it is open to challenge unless the legislature concurs with it. That is why they have said, if you modify, after all, what is Income Tax Department? It's an executive. It is nowhere near the, it's nowhere near the supremacy of the parliament. Therefore, if it does anything, it has to be tabled at both the houses of the parliament so that the members of the parliament can look at it and see whether it is okay, whether they have gone beyond, whether they have gone to the extent of, trespassing into their regime of making law. That is the purpose of 143(3)(c).
So we shall proceed further, sir.
Yes. Now, actually, I wanted the delegates to ask question on this particular aspect because this is
receiving in mixed kind. So
yeah. Okay, this is extremely important. Like, what does NESC do when the draft assessment order comes to it? It may accept the assessment. It may, if there is an adverse proposition, it will ask show cause notice from you, or it may simply send it to review unit. As I said earlier, as an assessee, you will come to know of it only if A is followed or B is followed. If C is followed, you will not even come to know. Even if an adverse proposition is made, you will not even come to know of it at this stage. Now, if, let us say, A is done, assessment is finalized. Once the assessment is finalized, the matter ends. Your assessment is done. Be happy. Your faithless, part is over. And then what will happen is NESC will transmit all the electronic records to a local jurisdictional officer. There ends the scheme of faithless assessment so far as you are concerned. If B takes place, then you will have to respond to it. Because there is an adverse proposition in the draft assessment order, they have asked you a show cause thing, and which will have to respond. So you will have to respond. If you don't respond, what will happen, we'll see later. Now, jump to C. Let us say NESC has chosen to assign your case to a review unit. So what will they do is to have assigned your draft assessment order to review unit. And as I said earlier, if they send it, they may send it to review unit, even if no modification is suggested, or even if modification is suggested. In either case, in whichever case, they may still choose to send it to review unit. If they send it to review unit, you are not in the picture as it. You don't even know what is happening. Okay. Now, once it goes to review unit, what does review unit do? Review unit may concur with the draft assessment order. It may say, okay, draft assessment order has been passed properly. One option. Another option is, it may say, no, draft assessment order is not okay. And it will give suggestion for modification. So two things could happen when it goes to review unit. And even here, review unit again, you don't know which is the review unit. Again, it's automated allocation, basis, whereby some review unit somewhere, some at corner would have possibly had this occasion to look at your draft assessment order. They may concur, they may not concur. Now, clause 18 says, if the review unit concurs with the draft assessment order, there would be modification, there may not be modification. If there is no modification and your returned income as accepted by the assessment unit in the draft order is also concurred to by the review unit, then no question of again coming back to you. They will go back to clause 16 and finalize the assessment order and send you the demand notice. I'll repeat again. When your case is referred to review unit, you would not know what is happening. Review unit will concur with the assessment order, and if there is no modification to your returned income, then the NESC will complete the assessment. On the other hand, if there is a modification to your returned income made by the draft assessment order and concurred to by the review unit, then because you are not being hitherto heard, then they will not pass the order. They'll go back to clause 16 and go to clause B. Then they will hear you. It is then you would get an opportunity of being heard. Now, this is if review unit concurs with the draft assessment order with or without modification. If the review unit says, no, draft assessment order is not passed properly, then it will have to give suggestion. Then it will go back to the NESC. Once the review unit gives suggestions and it will say draft assessment order is not passed properly, it will send the draft assessment order along with its suggestions to NESC. Then what NESC does is, it will send it to another assessment unit, not the original assessment unit. Look at this carefully. The review unit, I'll repeat again, does not agree with the draft assessment order and says that the draft assessment order has not been passed properly, then it will communicate it to NESC. Then whatever suggestions with the review unit will give, NESC will then assign it to an assessment unit other than the one which had passed the draft assessment order. So it will go to, from Ahmedabad, it will go to Calcutta. So Calcutta assessment unit now will be doing it. Even then you are not in the picture at this stage. You are not even in the picture. Now, what will Calcutta assessment unit do? It will consider the modification suggested by the review unit and send a final draft assessment order to the NESC. Now, NESC will receive the final draft assessment order. Once it receives the final draft assessment order, if your returned income is accepted, it will go back to clause 16 and finalize the order. If your returned income is not accepted, it will issue a show cause notice. So this, like arithmetics will have to be very carefully understood. So you may get show cause notice only once, but at multiple stages. Either you may get it directly from NESC at the first stage, or you may get it after the review unit concurs with the draft assessment order at the second stage, or if the review unit does not concur with the draft assessment order, suggests modification, it will go to some other assessment unit, it will pass a revised draft assessment order, and then if any modification is suggested which is adverse to you, then you will get a show cause notice. So you may get show cause notice only once at any of these stages. So this has to be very, very carefully understood. Now, you will have got show cause notice directly from NESC at first stage, or you would have got it at second stage, or you would have got it at the third stage. In whichever either case, once you receive it, you are expected to reply to it. If you give the response, your response will be sent to the assessment unit. Which assessment unit? Ahmedabad unit or Calcutta unit? Depending on which kind of SCN which you are responding to. If it is at the first stage, it will go to very same assessment unit. If it is at the second stage where there is a concurrence of review unit, it will also go to the very same Ahmedabad unit. But in the third stage, where the review unit has suggested modification, it did not agree with the draft assessment order passed by the Ahmedabad unit, it would have gone to Calcutta assessment unit, in which case your response will be sent to the Calcutta assessment unit. On that basis, the responses will be sent. Whatever response which you have made will be sent to the assessment unit, and On that basis, the assessment unit will pass a revised draft assessment order. Now, once they pass the revised draft assessment order, if there is no further modification, see, there is already a modification for which you have filed the response. If there is no further modification, then they will finalize the assessment order and send the order to you. On the other hand, if further modification is suggested other than the original modification for which you have already been heard, you have already given a response. If any further modification is suggested, then you will get one more notice, show cause notice. And whatever response you would send will be sent back to the assessment unit. They will then send it back to NESC. After considering your response, then they will go ahead and pass a final assessment order. So this is how they will do it. And after completion of all the assessment, all the electronic records will be sent back to a local jurisdictional assessing officer. Now, this is in sum and substance how the scheme works. But one another point which you have to notice, look at clause 2 of para 4, para 5. It says, notwithstanding anything contained in all that you have discussed, the principal chief commissioner or the principal director general head of NESC, with the prior approval of the board, may at any stage transfer the case back to the local jurisdictional assessing officer. For whatever reason, at any point in time, the top man in NESC will have to decide, and he has to have the concurrence of the board. With that, he can transmit the files back to the LJA, local jurisdictional assessing officer. This, in gist, is the scheme of the faithless assessment. Now, let me just explain this through a chart, very, very briefly, whatever I have discussed. So, look at this chart. NESC will issue notice to assessee under 143(2). Assessee will respond to that. Then through the automated allocation system, we'll call it an AAS. It will be sent to an assessment unit. Then assessment unit may require further information. It may require verification. It may require technical assistance, which it will require NESC to do it. Then NESC will allot it to the verification unit or technical unit. And also it will seek assessee the information, whatever information it will get, it will send it to the concerned assessment unit. And if you don't respond, then you will get an 144 notice. If you don't respond to that 144 notice, then the assessment unit will pass a best judgment draft order. If you respond, then considering the response, they will pass an order. Either they accept your return or may not accept your return, but that is not the end of the matter. Then in terms of clause 16, NESC will have three options. They may finalize, or they may hear you, or they may assign it to the review unit. If they want to hear you, they will give the show cause notice then and there. Otherwise, you will not even know. If they assign it to review unit, you will not even know of it. Then what will review unit do? It may concur with the draft assessment order. It may not. If it concurs, it will send it back to NESC. NESC will look at it. Is there a modification? Show cause notice to assessee. No modification, finalize the assessment. On the other hand, if the review unit will suggest modification, then these modifications will be sent to another assessment unit, not the original assessment unit. Then that other assessment unit will consider the modification and will pass a revised draft, final draft assessment order. It will come back to NESC. NESC will take a look at it. Oh, is there a modification adverse? Show cause notice. No modification, finalize. So therefore, an assessee may get a show cause notice on three situations, which I've explained, but only once. In any of these three situations, he'll get show cause notice. He will respond to it. If there's no response, assessment will be finalized. If he responds, the response will be sent to the assessment unit, which will pass a revised draft assessment order. Then that will be seen on the basis of whether any further modification is suggested or no further modification suggested, on which basis some iteration will take place and the assessment will be completed. Now, this is the scheme of paragraph 5. Questions?
Yes, sir.
Questions?
So we received some 4 to 5 questions, sir.
Yeah.
Question raised by Saranu Kumar, sir. In case the assessee requires more time limit to provide the details from the 15 days time limit demand, is there a chance for getting extension?
See, it's like this. There are two types of responses you give. One is once you get 143(2) notice from NESC, you will have to respond within 15 days. There is no extended time. There is no extension of time. However, when there is a show cause notice issued to you, or when a notice is issued to you in terms of, like clause 6 of paragraph 5 for furnishing further information as is requested by the assessing unit, in which case you could definitely ask NESC for extended time, but not for the preliminary response, only 15 days time.
Next question by Sanjeevi Rajan, sir.
Yes.
What is the legal position of the representative in the process of faceless assessment?
He continues to be same as 288(2). In fact, the paragraph 2 will define authorized representative shall have the same meaning as is assigned to it under 288(2) of the Income Tax Act. So whatever role you had earlier, you will have the same role here. You continue to help the assessee and collect your fee in the same manner.
Next question by Harindra, sir. How do they plan to overcome the language barriers? For instance, the books and records might be in their own.
So coming from Madurai in Tamil Nadu, obviously this question is to be expected. I don't think you would have difficulties in English, so don't worry, they may not do it in Hindi for you. Okay.
Next question by.
Anyway, let me answer this question. See, some of your there is a show cause notice to you. You'll have to respond. If you, because of want of time, I was not able to actually take you through paragraph 11 of the scheme. See, paragraph 11 of the scheme, sometimes you may find it difficult to do everything through electronic mode, in which eventuality you may request for personal hearing. But that personal hearing will not be face-to-face. It is again through video conference and video telephony. So the paragraph 11 takes care of it. So in some situations, you could ask for personal appearances through the video conferencing scheme, but not in all the cases, not by default, by exception. See, language barrier, you can always write. See, if any question, if notice comes to you in Hindi, you can say, please translate it in English and give it to us. Yes.
Madam, can I follow it up?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Please go ahead, sir.
Madam, sir, I am asking about our books of and records are in Tamil. So if we scan it and send it across to some units in Ahmedabad, they might not be able to read it. That's my question.
You don't worry. They will send it to technical unit for doing it. They will send it to technical unit for translation.
Okay, sir. Thank you.
In your own interest, you better translate so that the translator of technical unit should not, translate it wrongly to your detriment. So therefore, I would recommend, please translate yourself in the interest of the client and send it. It's in your interest.
So next question.
Yeah, some jokes were circulated in, like WhatsApp, where we had a leader of a political party making some speech in Kerala and Tamil Nadu. He intended to say something and it's translated totally something else by the translator. If such things were to happen, like by the technical unit, and unnecessarily your assessee will be prejudiced. So I would suggest you translate it yourself and send it. Yes.
Okay. So next question. Is there any limit for the size of the file?
No, there is definitely an issue. It is one of the issues.
Large file size.
We already have faced this difficulty of the difficulty of uploading huge files, because as you would upload the data in ITBA, as well as before the CIT appeals, whenever we were asked to upload, we have found it extremely difficult because the large data it's not taking. In fact, I had an occasion to mention this in the Doordarshan interview. where the principal chief commissioner was also one of the panelists. I mentioned to them that it's high time you take care of this requirement, because once you make it faceless, you have to really make it 360-degree, where whatever is possible to be manually given, you should facilitate furnishing such information through the internet. So you have to have the facility for it. You can't say, no, we don't have so much capacity. If the country can handle GST, the kind of the data in the GST network, compared to that, the income tax is nothing.
Question raised by the Lakshman sir. So whether the files are to be uploaded from the assessee's email ID or it can be sent from the CS Chartered Accountant mail ID. If so, whether power of attorney is to be filed.
See, power of attorney is always necessary, and if you would see the the definition of registered mail ID, and as well as if you go to the communication, it could be communicated either through your mail ID or through the mail ID of the authorized representative. So it's possible, because the paragraph 10, paragraph 9 and all provide for making communication even through the email ID of the authorized representative.
So power of attorney is to be definitely filed.
Of course, whether it's to be filed or not, you have to obtain it. That's needless to say.
No, if the assessee's the files are uploaded from the assessee's email ID itself.
Then you don't need the power of attorney.
Yes, yes.
Then you don't need the power of attorney unless you are signing the representation. See, many a times you'll have to give written submissions. You may want to sign it. In which case,
yes, if everything is signed by the assessee himself and from the assessee's email ID.
Sir, whatever is presently happening, if the presently assessee himself is going, if the assessee himself is signing, you are only drafting, then you don't need the power of attorney.
Yes, yes.
If you are signing, it is not different here. It's just the same.
Thank you, sir. Thank you.
Sir, any other member want to interact with the speaker directly, you can unmute yourself. The audio control has been released.
So, madam, what we'll do is, I think we have overshot by 16 minutes. We are supposed to have closed by 7:30. It's already 7:46.
Okay.
And I think we will take one or two questions and close it. Before that, see, to discuss, there are a few more aspects. It will take time. It will take at least another 1-2 hours. I don't think we can afford to spend so much time at this stage.
Okay.
I would take an excuse for not having been able to deal with it completely, because given this time constraint, this is the max that could have been done. I would only urge you to go through paragraph 5 very, very carefully. Keep noting various issues that would arise. Keep interacting professionally between your colleagues, and then communicate it whether through the institute or wherever, whichever platform, to the National Assessment Center to address these concerns. And I would thank Madurai branch. I would thank all the delegates for having raised questions. And I would before I would close, I would if the chairperson permits, we would take 1 or 2 questions and then close.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Sir, that's all the question received from the chat box. But if anyone wants to interact directly to the speaker, please unmute yourself and can raise the question directly itself. So we'll wait for some 2 minutes.
No problem.
Sir, whether penalty proceedings are also coming under the faceless assessment?
You have paragraph 6, which will deal with the penalty proceedings. If you look at paragraph 6, right now it deals only with that penalty which could be levied for non-compliance with the notices. Like you get 142 notice, or you get, you're asked to respond in terms of paragraph 5, clause 6. Or you'll get a notice in terms of best judgment. You failed to comply with it. Or you have been asked to do a verification. You have been asked to come for an examination. So you have 271(1)(b), 272 capital A. These penalties are dealt with by paragraph 6. But penalty for underreporting, penalty for misreporting, 270 capital A, that is not dealt with by the pageless scheme.
Oh.
So only some penalties are dealt with.
That will
As I said
come-
earlier, non-compliance penalties are dealt with. So you will have paragraph 6 that will deal with that. So the rest of the penalties, local jurisdictional officer will have to do.
Oh, the files will be transferred and he will deal with concealment, over-reporting, under-reporting, misreporting, etc.
And you will have to deal with him.
Oh. Thank you, sir.
Any other questions, sir? You can unmute yourself. Okay, sir. I think no one has responded. Okay, sir. We shall close the session. Now I request S.T. Venkatesh, sir, or SICASA chairman, to propose vote of thanks. Yes.
Happy evening to all. Respected Chairperson, CAAP Abhinay, ex-officio member of Madurai branch, SARC Chairman, CA DC Jain sir, today's speaker, Sri K.K. Chaitanya sir, and the members one and all. It is my privilege to have been asked to propose a vote of thanks on this meeting. On behalf of MPSARC, I would like to express our sincere gratitude to Advocate Sri K.K. Chaitanya sir for reviewing on excellent coverages to key challenges in business assessment. Wonderful presentation, sir. Thank you, Chaitanya sir. Also, I thank all past chairman, senior members, fellow members, and the junior members, one and all. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you. All the best. Thanks.
All the best.